Today's topic is reel maintenance, and we're going to go over to Lee McClellan, who is the associate editor of Kentucky Afield Magazine and the master of all things fishing in my mind. And he'll walk us through the basics of everything we need. Take it away, Lee.
Hope everyone's having a good evening. Tonight we're going to go over some things to quickly maintain your spinning and your bait casting reels. Now, a lot of people don't maintain their reels hardly at all. And I didn't for a long time until I started buying better stuff. And now I'm very diligent about it. And it's not that hard to do. The main thing is to do it regularly, at least a couple of times a year. You should do a quick time. We're going to go over all of it, how to pull stuff apart, how to tear this reel down a little bit. There's no need in tearing it completely down. There's no need in it. But it could take you maybe 20, 25 minutes, 2 or 3 times a year, and you can make a reel. This is an old reel that I've caught hundreds of smallmouth bass and largemouths on it. Hundreds of smallmouths in the years past. This reel's about shot. That's why I kind of picked it for tonight. I haven't opened this reel up in 15 years easily. So we're going to open it up, show you what the guts look like, show you some quick maintenance, and hopefully improve your fishing in 2022 as a result. Good equipment that performs well makes you much happier than equipment that performs poorly, especially when you have on Mr. Huge Fish, because that's when things will go wrong every time, is when you have a big one on. If you didn't retie your lure when you should have after you caught 3 or 4 fish on it, the big one will bite it every time and you'll break it off. So you don't want to lose a big one because your reel bound up because you haven't maintained it. And that's what we'll go over to tonight.
Okay. Everyone able to see his reel pretty well? So if you have any questions at any time, feel free to unmute, ask your question. If you're not comfortable with that, we have the chat feature. Ask your question there. Myself and Becky, who are also department staff, will be monitoring all that, and we'll try to get all your questions answered. And if you just want to wait till the end, that's fine as well. So, Lee, take it away.
All right. First, you'll need some paper towels, a little rubbing alcohol, some reel oil, and some reel grease. Walmart, Cabela's, any of those types of places will have oil and grease. One thing to avoid is don't use like 3-in-1 household oil, and do not use WD-40. WD-40 has its purpose and it's great stuff, but not for maintaining a reel. Okay. This is a typical spinning reel. This is an ultralight. It's for 2, 4, or 6 pound line. And this one is, the company makes reels anymore.
Hey, Lee, move your reel over to the right just a little bit.
Right there?
Yeah. Down just a touch. Towards you just a little bit. Right there. Perfect.
All right. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the spool. This thing that I'm unwinding right now is your drag assembly. Now, I can tell that I've still got oil in here from a long time ago. That's why I picked this one. Sorry, I didn't mean to move it. I had to get a little elbow grease on her. Now, a lot of people don't realize that this is your drag assembly. This right here. People don't realize that. Inside of this is your drag assembly. Now, you may want to add to this right here a few drops of oil, but don't overdo it. But that'll help maintain your drag. You don't have to do that maybe 1 time a year. You could tell by the shininess I have that this one's still retaining pretty good lube from the last time, a long time ago that I did it. Now, if you'll notice right here, there's some crud. You'll want to take a paper towel, pull the spool off. We'll get into the other part more. And just wipe this crud out. And also wipe right there as well. That's this assembly right here. That spring provides tension. As you crank down, that spring spreads out, and that's what makes your drag tighter. Now, If you loosen it, that spring comes back in and makes it looser. That's how that whole thing works. Okay. Now that fell off because it goes right here. Now, as you can see, I have not cleaned. This is the spool shaft. I have not cleaned it in a long time. So you can just take a paper towel, and if you want, this is when the rubbing alcohol comes in handy. I'm going to douse a little bit on this paper towel. A rag will work just fine. Probably a little better, actually. Don't go crazy, but just take some of this rubbing alcohol, and that'll quickly get that old gunky grease and stuff off of it. See how it's taking it off? And you can rub down the whole outside of your reel with this. Rub the spool shaft. There. Now, this washer goes on the bottom. And this is a little gear that goes all the way down. Then you have another that goes right there. Okay. Now, flip this over. And give that a good wipe out too while you're at it. A lot of gunk gets up in there. And you'll notice there's a little bit of crap right there that needs to come out. That's just from fishing. That's just from fishing it too many times. That is scum from freshwater.
I have a question.
Pardon?
Should I do this without, when I clean this, should I not have line on there?
It doesn't. No, for this, yes. And
Okay.
another thing too is, as you can see, this one is a little damaged because I dropped it while wading Elkhorn Creek, more than likely. One thing you'll want to do several times a year is to change your line. Now, a lot of people use fluorocarbon lines now, and those are more expensive. A lot of people use braid. What you can do is fill up a good chunk of your spool with cheaper monofilament, tie a knot, and in the last 75 yards or so, use fluorocarbon line. That'll save you a lot of money. Those spools of fluorocarbon get really expensive. Fluorocarbon is a much denser and much more clear type of line. And a lot of people, that's all they use. Now, if you want to keep your line on, to answer your question a little better, you could just do this part, wipe the bottom part, and wipe that out and keep the line on. But put little bit of oil on the shaft there. Take your, Andrew, let me know if I'm lined up correctly. See how it drops in?
So far.
Just pretty as a peach right there. I need to wipe a little bit better, get that crud out of there. There. Now, and then crank your drag assembly back on. I'm glad I picked this older reel, because while you're doing this, just take the time to wipe things down. If you want to get as much dirt off of it. Now, it's going to get dirty next time you fish, but it's good to take your reel and wipe it down.
Hey, Lee, we got a question.
Okay.
It's what if you have corrosion or rust on any of these parts? What's
Well,
your suggestions?
Take some 4/0 steel wool and a little bit of light oil, probably real oil, and see if you can buff that stuff out. Okay. If it's on like the spool or something like that, it's probably not going to hurt anything. If it's on the inside, that's not good. So if it's bad enough and it's impacting it, you may want to have to consider buying a new reel. But if it's cosmetic, 4/0 steel wool, which is 4 zeros, the finest, one of the finest, and some oil, and just gently buff it. It's amazing the stuff that you can fix with 4/0 steel wool and oil. Now, this is your roller bearing. This is what comes off the spool and puts the line when you open the bail, close it back. And another thing, never ever, after a while, a lot of people do it. Don't crank your handle to engage the spool, because every time you do that, you incorporate line twist. And over the course of a day, you cast dozens upon dozens, maybe hundreds of times. Depends on how long you're fishing. And every time you do that and you crank it back to make it do like that, you impart twist. And if any of you have dealt with spinning reels very long, you'll hear, and you look down and you have a bird's nest the size of Alabama. And one of the reasons is because of line twist. So muscle memory over time will take over. But every time you open before you start reeling in, manually flip your bail. Do not use your reel handle. Flip it manually. You will save yourself more headaches than you could ever imagine if you just learn to. It's muscle memory now. When I cast, open that up, I cast immediately. As soon as it hits, I do that. I haven't engaged a spool with my reel handle, my bail rather, in many years. And I rarely, if ever, have bird's nests. And that's one of the reasons. So this is your roller bearing. And that helps present bird's nest as well, because that rotates and lays your line on the spool real pretty. Put a few drops of oil there and then rotate it around. Make sure it's getting good and spread out. This reminds me, this weekend, if the weather is the way that they're predicting, I'll be doing this weekend to some of my reels. Now, the next thing to do is to oil right here where your bail assembly flips over. You don't have to go crazy, but just a drop or two right here in each of these. And then take your hand and go. And work it in. Now, you've cleaned and lubed the top part of your reel. Now, we're going to get into a little bit more technical stuff. First thing you have to do to get to the inside of this is to remove that handle. Now, there's several ways. It depends on your model of reel. This is a pretty easy model. See? Easy. Some open this first. If it has a screw in here that would match a Phillips or a flathead, then you've got to remove that screw to take the handle off. Now, some like this reel here, this is another Shimano, or I have, it's a Shimano rod. This has a screw that threads into here. So you've got to remove. I'm going to pull it out just enough so you can see where there's a screw right there that's attached to this cap. That goes into a threaded part of this. I'll show you here in a second. So if it's like this, you've got to remove it. Now, make sure you crank everything up before you go fishing. If it's a simple dude like that, just put this cap back on. And a lot of reels come this way. Grab the reel, making sure that you hold the spool rotor assembly and all that. Hold that tight, and then just reel backwards. And this will come right out. See? That's threaded, and it fits into that. So if you want to cheat and you want to be completely done, if you look really hard right there, there is a bearing assembly, a roller bearing. A lot of times, if your reel is acting sluggish, it's grabbing, it's a little grindy, it just seems off. I don't know how many times, especially when I've been on vacation at the ocean and been fishing. Just oil that bearing right there. You don't even have to do anything else. Just oil that bearing. And a lot of times, that'll be all it takes to get your reel singing again. Okay? So you could do that and be done. However, we're going to go a little deeper than that. Now, almost all reels anymore have this decorative cap. And a lot of them have a screw embedded underneath of this cap. Now, one thing that you'll want to do that I'm not doing is do this over a towel. That way, if that little screw gets in your carpet, see that little dude? There's some of them. That's actually a big one. I have a couple of reels. That thing is so tiny, I can't hardly see it when it's on the table. But I sure can't see it if it's buried in my carpet, rug, or under my couch. So do this on a towel. That way, if anything bounces, it doesn't go anywhere. See, there's one of the screws right there. Now, some have a small screw underneath, just like this one does, of this, actually, I call it decoration, but under this little assembly, under that little plastic cap. Now, take that screw out. And one thing I do too, on some reels, these screws are of different sizes. So I lay them on a towel, not like I'm doing right now, but on a towel, in the same way they came out of the reel, like that. Okay. This is a little Phillips head screwdriver. Very handy tool for, see, I put that one right there. These are all the same size, so I don't have to worry about it as much. But some reels, these top ones are a little shorter. And it's real easy to mess that up. Okay, so I kind of keep them in order like that. Now, normally I would do it, I'm leaving it here so you can see, but normally I'd put that off kind of on the side on a towel. Now, you have loosened, and here we go. There's the guts of the reel. There's the bearing that we saw a minute ago that I put oil on. Now, I'm going to see how this works. There's a worm gear underneath here that goes back as you reel, and then it comes forward. And that exposes another gear underneath here. Okay? One of the absolute cardinal rules is you oil bearings and you grease gears. Okay? You don't oil gears and grease bearings. Grease is wonderful, but it attracts grit, and grit and reels don't get along very well. So you want to take a little bit of grease, a little bit. Did somebody ask a question?
I did. Would you say that again? You oil bearings and you grease?
Yes, you oil the bearings, which are, this right here is a bearing. See that little assembly right there that spins? That is your bearing. And this gear, these gears, and this worm gear get grease. Okay? And go sparingly on the grease. I'm not going to put hardly any on here. People over-grease them. And if you get, that attracts gunk. So I'm going to spin this in. Get that built in a little bit. This reel is really well worn. It's been around a bit. Now, there's a worm gear underneath here, and you lube that. Again, don't put much on, and that should come up. You can lift that up a little bit, and then worm this shaft right here. Get that all pretty. And then I'm going to add a little bit of lube right here to this gear assembly, and that's it. Now, this reel is not in that bad a shape. However, if it were, you would want to take, if there's a lot of crud, an old toothbrush. This is one I got that actually came from the hospital. So those free ones they give you that aren't very good. And take a little rubbing alcohol, dip that down in there, and then clean those gears. But don't overdo it, because there's lubrication that's way up in there for those gears that if you soak it all night, like I've read instruction says soak it in rubbing alcohol. There's cleaning products on the market specifically for reels, but if you overdo it, you can lose some of that vital grease that's way up in here that's been in there since manufacture. And if you do that, it will always seem, I've got one reel I kind of ruined with that. It was a good reel. And to this day, I've done everything I can, but it still feels starved for lubrication. So it's better to just take the rubbing alcohol and take this toothbrush. You could, a lot of times you can pull this, some you can't, some you can. You can pull that gear all the way out and scrub all the way underneath, but you don't have to. Now, I like to take, after I do that, spin that around a little bit. It's already going much better. This reel was been around. And you can see now it's doing much better. So I'm going to add just a little more right there. And that's it.
Lee, we got another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they asked that you could get the grease out from inside like you're talking about, but you can't put it back in yourself.
Sometimes, well, it's just when I did it, it was way up in the real guts and it got to me. But if you just take the toothbrush and the rubbing alcohol and get rid of the cruddy grease you can see, that'll do you good. You don't have to, some people say pour rubbing alcohol in here and let it sit for hours and dissolve everything. That's fine if you plan to tear the reel completely apart and put it back together while lubing the parts as you put it back together. And I've been doing this for a long time, but I've torn some reels completely apart, but I don't recommend doing it very often. And another thing that I always do is when I buy a reel, they come with a little thing known as the schematic, which explains where every part goes, where it belongs. Always keep those for those times when you're doing this and you drop something or a part falls out and you can't figure out where it goes. You can look at your schematic and see where it went. So again, this reel was fairly starved for lube, to be honest. So I didn't really need to do the toothbrush and the rubbing alcohol. But if it's really gunky in there, I recommend it. But I just don't think you need to go glug, 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 glug like that and sit. Some people think that's great. This is about quick maintenance for people who are getting into fishing, who don't have the knowledge nor the time to completely tear a reel all the way down to the shaft. So since I've never done that again, and I have reels that I've got, I don't know how many hundreds of fish on that have been on hundreds of miles of float streams with me. And I've had them for 12, 15 years and they still perform like new and I never did tear or just get rid of all the lubrication. I took, when they were bad, I dunked this in rubbing alcohol, wiped it out with a rag or a paper towel and went on about my business. And it's proven to work for me a lot. Now, there. That's not that hard, now was it? So we're going to put these screws back.
And while you're doing that, we got another question.
Go ahead.
It says, any grease or oil manufacturers you would recommend from personal experience?
Well, there's several. This is a company. The one of the reasons I use these, and Shimano makes a great reel oil, but Ardent is as you can see, is an American company. The Quantum hot sauce grease and the hot sauce oil, both are excellent. However, they do bond to the metal in a molecular fashion, and they don't go well with all manufacturers. I don't recommend using Quantum hot sauce on Shimano reels. You want to use their Bantam oil. They're very adamant about that. And there's a reason they don't cohabitate. But almost all others, I've used hot sauce or I've used this real butter grease. They're great. Abu Garcia makes a white grease and a premium oil that's excellent. So does Penn. I know the Cabela's in Lexington has the Penn oil, but they have a whole kit that Ardent makes that I'm using now that actually someone gave me as a gift. It comes with that reel cleaner, which sparingly, great, don't overdo it, swabs, silicone rag, and a little toothbrush cleaner. So, and that's a great, and then also the reel oil and the grease. So that's a neat little kit. But these two are fine. Quantum hot sauce is good. I just wouldn't use them on Shimano's. Abu Garcia makes a good product. But don't use like 3-in-1 oil or stuff that's not really intended for. Get real oil. Don't get other oil that's intended for other stuff. Get oil that's intended for a fishing reel. All right. Is there any more questions? Well, I'm going to put some screws back in, and we're going to show you another little thing to do. Whoop.
I'll go on and ask this one. This is one I had for later, but how long do you think oil and grease will last? Like, how many reels do you think you could clean with one tube or one kit?
These? Oh, gosh. I've had this years. Now, if you go to the ocean and you have to, like, when I go to the ocean with my family, and I'll have to tear down and re-clean a couple of times that week. Now, if you're an ocean angler, you'll go through it a lot quicker than you will a freshwater. But a freshwater like this Spool will last several years. Now, this reel has been opened so many times. These screws get a little strippy because I've opened this thing about 10 million times, because this was the only decent reel I had for a long time. Now, I'm going to put that on later. I'm not going to fool with that decorative cap. Another thing you need to do is you need to oil right here. Oil right there. Some of these break apart, some don't right there. And especially oil right there. Really good reels have a bearing right there, so your handle flows pretty. The lower end ones do not, but the higher end ones have a bearing under there. Now, also on some reels, they have a bearing assembly underneath here too. So you can just take off that cap, lube that one, take off the handle, lube that one. And if that's all you did, you're probably going to be okay, because the bearings are usually what gets skunked up, not the gears. It's the bearings get a little grit. The lube gets washed out of them during a storm, or you dunked it or whatever. That's what starts giving you that grindy feeling, is usually the bearing, not the gears. Rarely do you strip a gear or wear these gears out, unless you have a cheaper reel that has plastic parts. You can bust those up. But good reels with quality metal parts inside, rarely is it the gears, it's the bearings. I had one ocean reel that I used. I couldn't even move the handle. And I was like, oh, Lord, I didn't feel like tearing it apart. I didn't feel like breaking it down. I just lubed the bearings, and after 3 cranks, it was singing like new. So if you can just lube this bearing assembly, your roller bearing right there between your bail arm and the rotor. This is called the rotor. Also, if you really need to get down into it, pull this off. And where you saw earlier, there's a nut on the bottom. You take that nut out and you can pull your whole shaft out. And but that's getting into the nitty gritty. And it's really easy to go, oh, where'd that part go? Or does this go right? And screw the reel up. Because believe me, I've done it. Okay. So right there, pull that. Remember, clean that, pull that. And this reel was grindy feeling. This is not an expensive reel. I think this reel new was $35. But it was kind of grindy and warm feeling. It's dramatically better now. This has not been maintained nor lubed in probably 2005 or so. Somewhere around there was the last time I fooled with this reel. But it's dramatically better. Okay. Now, some of your better Shimano's will do all that, but they have, if you see this little screw, here, I'll point to it better. Light may not be too good. That's called a maintenance port. All you do is take that screw out, put 4 or 5 drops of Shimano Bantam oil, put it back, and you're done. Is after you've oiled the roller bearing and cleaned underneath there and oiled the drag a little bit and oiled right here. But you don't have to tear, a lot of these Shimano, you don't even have to take it apart. You just oil right there. That is a wonderful, wonderful deal. Okay. Now, bait casting time. This is an older bait caster I have for years. I don't have it on a rod right now. Again, it hasn't been lubed in a long time. It's kind of one of my spares. It sits in my old reel bag. And with bait casters, more is less. Now, Andrew and I were talking earlier. This is the part that's the complicated part. The gears and all are mainly in this housing right here and in this part. But right here is a lot of the gears. You'll need to consult the schematic and stuff if you need to break this down, but most time you don't. You can do some really simple stuff. Most reels, not all, but most have a button right here. You push that button, bam. Did you hear? I hope you heard that. But it will click and then you grab it. I hope. I just did it 5 minutes ago. Come on. Let me see. Now, I've practiced this all day. And of course, the one time I'm going to restart. Grab that little button and click it like that. And I knew it would do it eventually. We'll get over that here in a second. As you can see, because this is a quantum reel, it's that oil is red. Quantum hot sauce, oil, and grease are red. So you know this is a quantum reel. It was factory used with quantum grease, okay? But I'm not going to use it tonight. But I have some at home. This is your spool. All you do is pull that little bad boy out. Take this end. Get some oil. And that, again, is a bearing shaft right there. Oh, this. And then grab your wheel. Oh, want to put a little bit of oil down in there. Again, with lubrication, much or less is more. A lot of people want to get in there and just put the hog grease to it. And I don't think you need to. I'm going to add just a little bit of oil. If y'all can see that right there. I really shouldn't be cross-contaminating with two different kinds of oil, but for the purposes of demonstration, it won't matter. See, and you get it like that? Click it back in. Wow. Now, another thing that can really help is it's hard to see on this reel. I probably should have picked another one, but I doubt you can see all the way in there. There is a worm gear that goes across right here. If you take oil and oil here and then oil there on that worm gear, you will not believe that it's already, this one was feeling crudmobile. Just doing that. Feels much better. Then take your oil right there and take your oil right there. And you've probably made your baitcaster for a year. Do that a couple of times a year and you're in business. I mean, this one has dramatically loosened up. That's why I picked two old reels. I didn't want some that I just did maintenance on them 6 months ago. I don't want that.
Lee, we got another question.
Yeah.
It says oil on the worm gear instead of grease.
Oil on the worm gear? On this one right here, yes.
Instead of grease, though? That's the question.
Exposed. Yeah, I'm glad they brought that up. Normally, some people do grease it, but if you notice, this is exposed to the air and the elements. And grease, again, is an attractant to grit. It attracts sand. So if you get grit or sand down in there, it's going to stick. If you use oil, it won't as bad. It won't hardly at all. But if you grease that real heavily and you accidentally drop this on a sandy bank on the Kentucky River, say you're casting for catfish, you drop this and sand gets in that and it's been greased, you're going to have a hard time getting that smooth again. Every other year, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good point. Every other year, except for this one, use a light coating of grease. But for this one, oil, because it's exposed. Anything that's exposed to elements, you want to use oil. Because grease attracts grit. And this is dramatically smooth. Now, this is not an expensive reel, and it feels dramatically better than when I came in. Now, another thing to do is every once in a while, take, I use sometimes Windex on a paper towel. You can use rubbing alcohol. Rub the entire reel down. Get rid of all the crud on the sides and on the side plates and all, because that's just stuff that's going to get inside of it eventually. So keep that pretty. If you go out and you go bank fishing and you get it all dirty, don't stick in the corner. Wipe your reel down when you get home. Okay. And if you go ocean fishing on vacation, always stop by on your way from the ocean and take a water hose and spray it down good. And then I always spray with like a Real Magic or Kevin Van Dam line conditioner, or whichever brand, that Real Magic line conditioner stuff. I spray that over the entire reel whenever I'm in a saltwater environment. Or if I know I'm going to be in if it's going to rain that day, I put a coating of that on there too, to kind of keep the rain to fly off there. That stuff also does great on fluorocarbon and monofilament lines. It keeps them supple and not springy. I cannot stand a line that goes because it has so much memory. That drives me up a tree. So you also want to put a little oil. If you can get to it just in there, you can get down in that, not much. And get that down in that handle assembly thing right there. Or you can take that nut off and pull it all off, but then you've got your star drag and you can get into some stuff there. So I know that's not much good. That'll get them singing. Just you spend that half hour with them, they are singing. And after you oil everything, you'll want to wipe off the oil and stuff from the reel, so that way you don't drop it the next time you grab it, and it won't attract grit. So there's my beat to death I bought in 1995 spinning reel that is now doing much better than it was. And this is my 10 to 12-year-old baitcaster that was feeling pretty tired and is now feeling smooth. So I would love to entertain some more questions. But that's all it is, folks. There's not a whole lot to it. To go to review. Take off the spool, oil the drag system just a little bit, clean all the gunk out from in there, oil the shaft. Then oil your roller bearing right here, oil right there, and check what kind of attachment it has for your handle. Sometimes there's a screw in here. Sometimes there's a screw attached to this cap, or sometimes it's like this. You just reel backwards and it comes off. If you're lucky and things and you've treated people well and God loves you, if you just oil that bearing, it can make it feel like brand new and you don't have to do anything else. However, if it's pretty gunky, take the side plate off, light coating of grease on any gears, and oil in the bearings. And the only time you want to use oil on a gear is this worm gear here in your baitcaster. And to repeat with the baitcaster, press the side plate. There's a little button, releases that. It's always on the side of your drag control, of your magnetic braking system. Pull it off, pull that out. Oh, I forgot. You also want to place a little bit of oil on the end of that shaft too. Whoop, forgot that. Pull that out, lube it, and put this back in. Turn it. There she goes. Oil that, and you're good. So.
Okay, Lee, we got us some questions coming in.
Okay.
So I wish I would have thought of this as well. It says, how often should you clean the spin cast reels like a Zebco 33?
The same as you would. Now, they don't require the maintenance of these because they're a pretty simple construction, but you'll want to, I should have brought one. I don't use spin cast much anymore, but they're excellent for kids. And also a lot of professional anglers use them to skip lures under docks because they don't cause any backlash or line twist issues doing that. But you'll want to respool it at least 2 times a year, if not 3. Take that front part off. You can see some gearing. And if it's real easy to take that back cover away from the middle part, I guess you could say, and there's some exposed gearing there, put a little light bit of little grease on those gears. I don't know if they have ball bearings in those or not, but if they do, oil the ball bearings. But do the same thing. Grease the gears, oil the bearings. But you just take that front cover off, and it depends on the model. And you can often you can expose it just by taking that front cover off and pushing in the button, and that'll make the assembly pop out, and all the guts are exposed right there. So you can lube it and maintain it right there.
Okay. My next question is, it says, do you need to do anything to new reels before you go out?
Typically, no. Now, a gun's a different story. If you buy a new pistol, you buy a new shotgun, you buy a new rifle, most people want to clean it as good as it's ever been cleaned because it's packed with a lot of grease sometimes from the factory, etc. Fishing reels are the exact opposite. Take them out of the box and go fish them. Because when you use them, that lube, that grease especially that was applied in the factory, has to have a chance to work its way into all the nooks and crannies. So don't touch a new reel. Go fish.
Okay, and then I've got another one. It's saying that their Baitcaster is an older model. They use the word vintage and says theirs doesn't look like that. Now, I assume the parts are similar, just change just a little bit, but you can probably find a schematic.
5,000 type reel, you know, that older style.
But you can probably find a schematic on that somewhere to know where these parts are, the oil and all that.
And again, it's probably, if you take it apart, the side opposite the handle you're probably going to be able to pull the spool from there. But some of those old rounder style Ambassador 5000s that when I was growing up was the top of the line Baitcasting. You had a red Ambassador 5000, you had the stuff. And those, you don't see as many as those anymore, but almost always you access that spool from the side opposite the handle. So if you can find the schematic for that, and with the resources available on the internet now, you could say, oh, I don't know, 1974 Ambassador 5000 schematic, and you can get it. So, but just try to remove the screws and see if that spool assembly's in there, and you can pull it out and lube that spool. Lubing the spool will get 80% of what you want done. It's amazing. It can feel like complete crap. You lube that spool, and it feels like the day it came out of the box. So, but if it's over your head, there's people that you can send reels to that for a fee, of course. They will tear it apart, clean it up, lube it, and put it back together for you for some of those vintage reels that are getting just beyond your ability. But if not, almost always it's the side opposite the handle.
Okay, so the next question is, anything special to do for the reel if you drop it in the lake or submerge it, flip your boat, anything like that? Should you clean it? Should you not?
I've done it a lot. If it's real quick in and out, if it keeps going, Lord, I dunk mine. If you go kayaking, you're going to dunk your reel at least twice a day. So if it's not that bad, but however, if it was submerged and it went down, open it up, take the plates off and let it sit overnight. Preferably by somewhere near a heat exchange so it gets good air on it, like near your air conditioner or heater vent, especially this time of year. Put it kind of on a shelf near your heater vent and just let it dry. Then lube it just like we said and put it back together and see what happens. Usually letting it dry and relubing it will usually clean it. Again, do not use WD-40. Even though a lot of people, that's called water displacement 40. That's what the WD stands for. But it has no use in any kind of spinning reel or baitcasting reel. Open it up, relube it, you should be fine.
Well, I think that's all the questions I'm seeing in the chat. Anybody else have anything else they want to ask?
I have, Andrew, I have a quick question.
Okay.
Well, it's actually my husband. So when you hear a man's voice.
Yeah. Hey, Lee, this is Scott here. Me and Rachel.
Hey,
are
what's up,
actually
man?
watching- Oh, doing pretty good. Yeah, we're actually watching together here. I had a question, and this might be more repair related really than maintenance. So if it's like out of the scope of what you're talking about, maybe it doesn't fit. But we've got some casting reels, and what seems to always go on them is the only trouble I have out of them is like the level wind it'll work for a few years, and then after a few years, usually the level wind will get stuck on one side.
Right there, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So that'll get stuck on one side, and you can kind of manually kind of jump start it and get it to go, and it'll feed a little bit, but usually it gets stuck on one side and doesn't want to move. I don't know if that's something that can be repaired or what's going on there.
The first thing I would do was to try to get to it and clean that, because that going back and forth takes gunk and goes to each end of that worm gear. So it could be just an accumulation of stuff that's causing it to stick. So the first thing I would try is cleaning, and just get down here maybe a little bit with some rubbing alcohol or some of that commercial reel cleaner, and let it sit a little while and see if you can work it loose, and then lube it. If you can get that worm gear out of there, that's pretty complicated on some reels. But if you can get it out of there and look at it, that'll help. Usually if you flip this little plate, you can get to it. But oftentimes it's a gunk factor. If not, then these things are plastic and they break, and that could be part of it too. But a lot of times when that's happened with me, I've had them and I've cleaned them and it came back. But I've had them stick, especially older reels do that. And those kind that are like more for ocean or stripers or bigger stuff, that line guide and that worm gear are completely exposed. So that's where the crud can come in, and water and all these things can do that. So first I would just try to clean it. Second, then you may need to be looking at a more intensive repair. And if it gets over your head, send it to a reputable manufacturer, that a lot of times like Shimano, any of them, you can send a reel back. It's $25. They'll lube it, clean it, and fix it for you. It's for a fairly nominal fee. So first thing though, try to clean it, because it's probably goop grabbing it and it's sticking. But if not, then this plastic piece may have broken or that gear is chipped. But try cleaning it first.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question. Anything else from anybody? So I'll give some pointers that I've learned too. Is if you can't find the schematic or anything, or you're not smart like Lee and saved it, or you got your reel secondhand, is take pictures with your phone every step of the way. That way, this is supposed to look like this, and you can go back to it. We had another good suggestion in the comment section to use a cookie sheet to keep all your parts and screws together.
That's a good idea.
Slide off the table. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
That's a real good idea.
Well. Yeah, I'd put the towel in that too. Just knowing me, it's going to bounce somewhere. But most manufacturers provide the schematics and everything you would need. And if you want to dive in to taking the side plate off of your bait caster and getting into the gears and stuff, I would take pictures every time you do it. I still take new pictures every time. I've put stuff in backwards and you get it all back together, and then your reel doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Yep.
Yeah. So you got to take it all apart again.
You're like, what have I done? I've been there and done that.
So those are just some of the suggestions I have for people. So last call for any more questions or anything. All right. Well, just a few more things. If you enjoyed our webinar, great. We got a few more coming up. We've got one on March 15th covering artificial baits. So if you want to learn how to use artificial baits, the focus will be on bass fishing. And we'll have Jay Wallen, who is a Hobie Pro, which is a kayak brand. So he'll be there to talk about artificial baits. He's very knowledgeable, and he'll be able to answer any question you could ever have. We've got another webinar on May 19th called Catfishing 101. So teach you all you need to know about catching catfish. And then June 14th, we'll have another one covering bow fishing. So how to get started in bow fishing, if you're interested in that. Sign-ups will be available on the calendar soon, if not already, for these classes. So be on the lookout for those. if you think of any questions after you log off, which we all will, it's like a trip to Walmart, you forgot something every time. Just
Mhm.
email it to me and I'll get it to Lee. And if me and Lee don't know, we'll find somebody who knows and get it answered.
We'll find somebody that does.
Yeah.
Sure thing.
So, or just any general fishing questions you have, just feel free to ask us. We'll get you the answer. And if we can't answer it, we'll send it to Info Center.
Get winter over with as quickly as possible so we can all get back out on the water.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not going to stop me though. I'm heading to Cumberland sometime next couple of weeks. I can tell you that.
But, yeah. So if that's all I've got, thanks everybody for coming. I'll hang out for a few more minutes, but we're good. Thank you, everyone.